And welcome back to the show at 6:47 as we drive into work this morning. Getting this week underway just for the break, talking a little bit about, what happens, these ideas, AOC and others have talked about just, expanding government debt and spending money without consequence. And you wonder why that actually is gaining some traction, right? So, and here's the way to think about this is that if the economy is doing as well as we're told, right, then people should be saying, why do I want, I'm doing great. I've got a job, I'm making good money. Everything's great. Why do I need, or why would I want a different way, right? Why do I want a different system? And of course, you've got, leaders exploding onto the forefront. Here we've got this 29-year-old bartender out of New York that has exploded into notoriety, of course, mostly with millennials and Gen Zers, with her views on, changing America, right? Climate change and changing the way that we do business. And, we're getting rid of oil and gas and people because apparently we shouldn't have kids. So in a couple of generations, we'll all be dead anyway. So we will have a very green climate at that point once everybody's dead. But that's the idea. And then, of course, Bernie Sanders, has thrown his hat back into the ring to run for president. And he was almost the candidate for the Democrats last time around. I mean, he did very, very well. And which is surprising considering that he's, right up there with being a socialist. And he's back onto the ring again. And will probably do well this time also because people are gravitating towards that. There's two polls out last week, though, that I found were interesting and talking about this. Trump, and again, we talked about before that in last year, before we went into the midterm election cycles, and this was early last year, 2018, I talked about the fact that you need to be careful going into 2018 and into that election cycle because as conservatives, we tend to get complacent with things. So, Trump was elected. Everybody gets very complacent with that he's president. We had control of the House. We had control of the Senate. And I said, be careful with this because there's a lot of angst on the left, a lot of anger. And that's going to motivate them to turn out and vote. And that's what happened. And of course, we saw a turnover in the House to Democratic control. And again, we're going to see this coming up in 2020 as well for the presidential election. We've got to be careful that, again, we don't become complacent with the idea with Trump being president in this because the left is very angry. They're very upset. And even the never-Trumpers and people who are kind of independent in the middle are all motivated to show up and vote. And we're going to have a big field of Democrats coming out this year. And it's interesting. There's even people talking about trying to find a Republican to run against Trump as president. So, but it was interesting because they ran a generic, they ran a poll. Now, this was a Wall Street Journal poll, which leans left, by the way. So just be aware of that. But they ran President Trump against a generic Democratic rival, right? Nobody in particular, just a generic Democratic rival in the early stages of the 2020 race. And it was basically a dead heat. Another poll was just the opposite. So if you take a look at most of the generic polls, the generic candidates that were running against Trump, they all lean socialist, right? And take a look at a lot of the field that's coming up, whether it's Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders, et cetera. The majority of their platform leans towards the socialist nature of the agenda. Another poll that was out was also from Wall Street Journal, said that over 75% of voters would reject socialists or candidates that lean that way in an election. So, again, this is the problem with all these polls, right? As we saw in the previous election, these polls come out, and of course we pay a lot of attention to them. It's like the poll says so-and-so is going to do this or so-and-so is going to do that, and it turns out that absolutely the opposite occurs because these polls are very slanted and biased in a lot of directions. But here's the thing that we do want to pay attention to is that there is a movement afoot for socialism. And we've talked about this before on the show, is that if you take a look at what's coming up, I mean, Ocasio-Cortez is a great, kind of focal point about the millennial and Gen Z generations that are coming up. Her attitudes, her views on climate change, on equality, on all these things. What it should tell you is that conservatism as we know it as baby boomers is dead. Conservatism as we know it, Reaganism, etc., will be dead after this generation. And we've talked about this before, which is the biggest danger for the economy going forward for the next several generations is going to be the debts and the deficits. And there is a new attitude, these new theories that are coming out, of which there is no anecdotal evidence to support them at all, is that we will continue to increase debts and deficits in the hope that it will create economic prosperity and wealth for all. But there is no evidence historically that solving a debt problem with more debt actually works. So we'll see. But keep a watch on this because, we're seeing more and more slant in that direction. And particularly as we come up into the 2020 election cycle, you're going to hear a lot more about this stuff. You're going to hear a lot of stuff, people talking about MMT. You're going to hear a lot of talk about debts and deficits, why they don't matter. Because you have to have that commentary in order to support the idea that you can have expanding economic growth. All right, got to wrap it up for the day. We'll be back. Have a great Monday. We'll see you tomorrow on the next edition of the Lance Roberts Show, right here on the Voice of Texas. Get by our website, lancerobertsshow.com or realinvestmentadvice.com. Get our latest blog post. Also, click on our YouTube tab to get all of our latest YouTube videos as well as our podcast, all on the website, realinvestmentadvice.com. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.
Want a longer talk with Lance about your money? Request a personal one-on-one at realinvestmentadvice.com.